going to talk about how marine organisms were useful in combating cancer. Actually, marine organisms were useful in combating a lot of diseases, but just for simplicity reasons and to make it a bit shorter, I'm going to talk about cancer, knowing that it's the context of what I study. So just one definition before I start. Marine pharmacognosy, I did not know about this word either, so it's fine, is a branch of pharmacology which is concerned in studying compounds that are present in the aquatic plants, and its objective is to try and find out whether or not we can develop therapeutic agents from those compounds. Now, just a little bit of history before we start. Marine science has been on for many, many years, as I did not know before. Actually, it started around 1200 BC with the Phoenicians, and even though I'm a descendant from the Phoenicians, they have no records. So the first person who had a record in marine science was Aristotle. And he was the first to define organisms in the sea, and he was named the father of marine pharmacology. Later on, it was Captain Cook who took over and started discovering a lot of unmapped seas and unmapped oceans. And he was then followed by someone who's actually known for the theory of evolution, but he actually significantly contributed to the knowledge of marine species. So marine compounds and drug discovery has been on for a long, long time. And over the past few years, we started having a lot of compounds which originated from the sea and which reached clinical trials and which are now being used to treat people with cancer. As you can see, from the chemistry and chemical compounds that we can find, there's a lot, but then only 7 are FDA approved. So we need to find more to increase the chances of finally getting a drug into the market. So why marine compounds? First of all, the richness and the diversity of the sea. I must say I was very amazed to find out that only one animal phyla out of 33 is terrestrial. The rest is in the seas. So you can actually have an idea of how rich and how diverse our sea is. The next motive that pushed scientists is to get compounds from the sea is actually the inspiration from self-defense. You see, living in the sea is not really easy. You have to be, you're a competer all the time. You have a lot of things you need to defend yourself from. Pressure, very extreme temperatures. And so there's a lot of organisms in the sea which have physical and chemical defense. And some organisms are just slackers, like the sea urchin. So they actually depend on their chemical abilities to defend and to fight their predators. So if you think that we were the first human beings to make up chemical weapons, then think again, because those little fellas have actually started doing that long, long, long ago. In the end, the potency of those compounds is something really, really important to consider in discovering drugs, because you know the seas are really, really large, and these compounds, in order to work in the seas, they really have to overcome the dilution factor of the water they're inside. I know, the talk is not really nice, but I mean, come on. So again, no, I'm kidding. So to get back to cancer, the discovery from marine organisms and their anti-cancer properties started to come up from many different organisms in the sea, starting from vertebrates such as the fish and the sharks, to invertebrates such as starfish, sea urchins, crustaceans, and microorganisms like fungi and bacteria and cyanobacteria. Now you may ask yourself the question, how? How can we just discover one thing in those wide 7 seas and just get them to treat people with cancer very easily? The process is really, really difficult, and really long, and I won't go through it, but I just want to show you that we can end up from this to this. How? I tried to compress it all in just one scheme. So basically they start by the expedition and the research in the seas, and they get isolated compounds, and they ferment them, extract them, and then they screen them. And this is actually a really, really smart way of trying to find out which compound has activity right away. So what they do with those compounds after extracting them and purifying them is testing them using bioassays and seeing which compound actually has a response. One example is the National Cancer Institute, which always welcomes a lot of organisms from the sea and tries to screen them against something they call the 60 panel, in which they try new compounds they don't know on 60 different cancer cell lines. And then when they record one hit, they just take that further for discovering a lead and to make clinical compounds. So in summary, that's how it happens. But if we didn't really have technologies, and if we didn't really have the innovations in chemical techniques right nowadays, we would not be able to find out a compound in 1 or 2 weeks. It would take us years and years. And so to isolate this compound and to collect them, we can do it in many, many ways. It started with wading, scuba diving, and we have dogs to help us with that. It also started with nets, sensors. We're starting to get out with the budget, and submersibles. 45,000 euros per day. So it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of staff, and it takes a lot of work. But in the end, it's really, really, really important. Now, just to sum up, and just to give you some examples of actually some anti-cancer drugs, which some of you might know if they work in cancer, more than half of the drugs that are being used right now to treat cancer are derived from natural products. And this shows the effectiveness of that technique. And this shows the effectiveness and the importance of actually getting such anti-cancer products from the seas. So, this is scary, but I will only give some examples about some FDA-approved drugs, which are actually developed from organisms in the seas, which we never knew about. The first one is developed from the mollusk, which is this creature over here, called I'm not a biologist, so I'm reading them out loud, Dolabella auricularia. And it does this thing here. And it is this thing that was actually inspired, it was a molecule which chemists got inspired of to make an antibody to treat Hodgkin's lymphoma and a lot of other cancers. And it worked pretty well. Another example is something we derive from sponges. For example, from this sponge, there was a very, very, very important drug called cytarabine, which is really used in chemotherapy right now. And the thing about this sponge is that when the chemists isolated some compounds from them, they isolated 2 nucleotides. Everybody familiar with nucleotides? Those nucleotides had a sugar different than the ribose sugar, which is in our nucleotides. And so, still, they could integrate in the DNA, but they could be like a Trojan horse, and they could kill the cell. So, this molecule right here has saved many, many, many lives. This is another kind of sponge, which also gave this, which we call a microtubule inhibitor from the halichondrin, and it is actually a very, very, very potent drug. And the nice thing about it is that it does not really create the same toxic side effects that all chemotherapy, conventional therapy creates. So no hair loss, no cytotoxicity for normal cells, and it works pretty well. Last but not least, the tunicate, which is this beautiful creature right here that gave us this beautiful structure. For me, it's beautiful. I don't know if it is for you. And And, well, I mean, nature was already there to synthesize this compound, and all we had to do is just play around and tweak a bit with the molecule so that we can make it potent and optimized enough to treat people with cancer. And I think this is pretty awesome. And so, a lot of other drugs, actually up to 600 compounds have been now used as, they're not being used as anti-cancer, but they've entered clinical phases 1, 2, and 3, and a lot of them are doing a huge progress, and they all come from different marine organisms. Now with that, I'd like to say that the whole concept of using marine organisms or any other organism, be it from the sea or from the earth, is actually taken from the proverb, which is poison kills poison. So, in the end, if you just think about it, the sea urchin and I share the same atoms and the same molecules. And if I was to ask that sea urchin for help on how it defends itself in this big world, which is sometimes cruel, I can get a lot of answers. And so I think that using nature is something incredible in medicinal chemistry. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for really listening to me. I mean, that's the first time I didn't hear a lot of noise. And to keep the oceans clean.